Today we'll be unpacking the Jehovah's Witnesses and their failed end times predictions. Let's get into it. Now, before we unpack this video, I want us to play a little game here. 1. For how many years have the Jehovah's Witnesses been forecasting the end of the world? In the comment section, let me know what you think the figure is. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna give you a moment. Type in your answer. I'm waiting. Okay, number 2, how many specific dates have they incorrectly predicted? Again, I'm going to give you a moment. Type in your response. I'm waiting, guys. Let me know in the comment section. And now I'm going to give you the answer. The Jehovah's Witnesses have built their entire religion on one key belief, that the end of the world is just around the corner. And when they say around the corner, guys, it's been 150 years. Oh my gosh. And have been wrong every single time when they tried to predict a specific date when the world would end. 6 times, guys. 6 times. That's how many times the Jehovah's Witnesses have tried to predict the end of the world. Imagine, 6 times. How many times is it going to take for people to wake up? They have failed prophecies that have occurred in 1874, 1914, 1918, 1925, 1975, and currently the generation teaching 1995 until present date. They have since developed a pattern of shifting the goalpost, and instead of admitting that, hey, we were wrong, they will just reframe the prophecy to make sure their followers are loyal to the organization and still engaged. Now let's unpack each date one by one. Firstly, we have the first invisible return of Christ. This was in 1874, and Charles Taze Russell, who was influenced by an Adventist preacher called Nelson Barbour, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but in any ways, they calculated that Jesus had invisibly returned in 1874 and that Armageddon would follow soon. Now, this was based on pyramidology and the idea that Daniel's dental times, the prophecy pointed to 1914 as the final end. In 1879, the Watchtower claimed the Lord has been present since 1874, but his presence is not visible to human eyes. Watchtower, January 1, 1914, page 5 for those who care. Now, as we know, they will always change these prophecies when they don't come into fruition, and this is what they said. After nothing visibly happened, they claimed Jesus did return, but it was invisible in heaven. And then later, they shifted the date of his return to 1914 to keep members engaged. Now, how did this affect members? Well, the failure shattered the credibility of early Bible students before they became Jehovah's Witnesses. Some left, but many stayed loyal, believing that the new interpretations would eventually prove true. Now, let's move on to 1914. Now, 1914 is one of the most famous failed predictions by the Jehovah's Witnesses. What was the reasoning behind it? Well, Watchtower literature explicitly stated that the end of the world would come in 1914. In 1889, the book The Time is at Hand confidently declared the Battle of the Great Day of God Almighty will end in 1914 with the complete overthrow of Earth's present rulership. The Watchtower also wrote, "We see no reason for changing the figures, nor would we change them if we would. They are, we believe, God's dates, not ours." Let me read that again. "We see no reason for changing the figures, nor would we change them if we would. They are, we believe, God's dates, not ours." Yep. As we all know, 1914 came and nothing happened. And the Jehovah's Witnesses just decided to shift their teachings as always and said that Jesus had begun ruling, but only in heaven, where no one could see or confirm conveniently. And somehow the world's governments were now on borrowed time before Armageddon would come. How did this affect members? Thousands of followers expected the world's governments to collapse. And of course, this did not happen. Many sold their properties and quit their jobs, thinking they would not need them. Imagine all of the pain, the suffering this actually caused. The disillusionment spread, but the Watchtower kept moving like they did not care. They just changed the goalpost and kept it moving like nothing had happened. Yes, they changed the goalpost and kept it moving to 1918, when Christendom would be destroyed. After 1914 failed, Watchtower leaders claimed that the churches of Christendom would be wiped out in 1918 as punishment for false teachings. Who's the one actually teaching false things here? Watchtower. And I quote here, in the year 1918, when God destroys the churches wholesale, millions of people will perish. Let me shock you guys. 1918 came and nothing happened. No. Can you believe that? The churches remained as is. And Watchtower just reworded what they said because, hey, they didn't say anything wrong. They just meant that it was a spiritual cleansing that no one could see. Duh. How did this affect members? While many expected an actual visible destruction of the churches, as the Jehovah's Witnesses probably depicted, they were disappointed and it led to membership losses. But others, again, as always, the hard-headed ones did remain, believing that the prophecy will still unfold. Now, this is my favorite prophecy. The millions now living will never die. 1925, Joseph Rutherford confidently declares to the masses that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob would be resurrected in 1925. In the book Millions Now Living Will Never Die from 1920, he stated, "May we confidently expect that 1925 will mark the return of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the faithful prophets of old." Now, if anyone lacks accountability, it's this sassy man, because when nothing happened, he was like, oh my gosh, why are you guys looking at me? Why are you reading too much into what I am saying? Because how dare you guys think I was confident? I was not confident. No ways. Imagine being blamed for something someone else said. Someone who told you be confident in what I'm saying, and then being blamed for believing them. Thousands left. That's how it affected members. It was one of the biggest membership losses in JW history. However, as always, there are those who stayed and were deeply entrenched in the belief system. And then we have the great disappointment that was 1975, where Watchtower strongly hinted that 1975 would bring Armageddon because it marked 6,000 years of human history. The Kingdom Ministry stated in 1968, "Does this mean that God's battle of Armageddon will be over by 1975? It could." Well, nothing happened in 1975, and as always, they blame members for expecting too much. Like, guys, why do you read too much into what this organization says? Why? They've been inconsistent. Have you not learned? How did this affect members? While many sold their homes and businesses and drained their savings and put off even going to college. Remember, college was deemed satanic around this time as well. When Armageddon didn't come, they experienced another mass exodus of members. But as always, some did stay. Then lastly, we have the most recent end of world or end of time prediction from 1995 until present day, called the overlapping generation doctrine. So Watchtower previously taught that the 1914 generation would see Armageddon. Guys, there are so many people who were born in 1914 and before who have died even after. So as those people are dying, they had to change the teaching. So they renamed it to overlapping generations. And basically they have this whole diagram that you can see here on the screen explaining that. This doctrine is very confusing and vague, and this is for a reason, to extend the timeline indefinitely. So older members now feel so betrayed. Like, this is how it's affecting members, to think that we were told we won't die, we will witness Armageddon, and people are dying. This religion is honestly so bizarre, so weird, and very delulu. Jehovah's Witnesses, delulu is sometimes not the solulu. To wrap up this video, we have to talk about the real world damage of Watchtower's failed prophecies. Firstly, people go into financial ruin. We have to talk about the people who had to quit their jobs, lost their homes, and even let go of educational opportunities, thinking that the world would come to an end. This is not something to be taken lightly. Watchtower has ruined thousands, if not millions of people's lives. And this destruction of people's lives not only affects the individual, the person going through it, but it also affects generations to come. Think about it. People who have landed up in poverty, homeless, lost their jobs due to these failed prophecies, now have to raise their children in what? poverty, a whole generation being affected, and generations to come. Then there is the destruction of family units. When a person decides to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses after another failed prediction, they also get shunned. Yes, so now you don't only lose your religion or your faith, you also get to lose your family. And not to even mention the people who put off having children, so who didn't even get the opportunity to have a family unit because they thought the world is coming to an end. We also need to keep in mind that all of these things have psychological effects. When a person is constantly under fear, anxiety, thinking that the world is going to end, it does something to them. And then you leave, you deal with depression because you've lost your family. Some people also deal with cognitive dissonance, so they're struggling to come to terms with their reality. They sometimes even struggle to believe what Watchtower has done to them. They'll find themselves having to defend this religion even when the facts are presented right in front of them. And once again, this also affects generations to come. So if you don't heal your mental health issues, if you don't come to terms with them and you have children, they will be passed down to them. Again, Watchtower is not just destroying people, but it's destroying generations to come. Lastly, when people leave high control religions and have these mass exodus or even just leave on their own, it can be very daunting because you are also losing your faith, something that you literally molded your whole life around. It can be very difficult to come to terms with what has happened to you, what you experienced, and this is where the cognitive dissonance can come in, or sometimes even when you are still in the religion and you're seeing all of these things happen, but you don't want to be honest with yourself. Losing your faith is one of the most painful things that you can go through because, again, we shape our lives, our world views through our faith. And when you lose it, it can literally turn your world upside down. But it's very important to anchor yourself in your authenticity, in your truth, in your lived experiences. Be honest with yourself. Face the truth. Tell yourself that this was not your fault because it wasn't. You were part of a cult, and losing your faith is not the worst thing that can happen to you because that's something you can always find again. That is something you can always navigate in the future and redefine it for yourself. As we wrap up this video, I think it's very important we ask ourselves that if an organization that claims to speak for God but gets every prophecy wrong, should people still trust it? And that brings us to the end of the video. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.